How you guys doing? Hey, Goldfinger, Al, John. Good to see you guys. I'll tell you, since this morning when the whole issue of high horology first came up, I've been thinking about it. And hey, Dominic, and it's I believe. Hey, Brian, I believe that the origin of or at least I'll say continuation of the whole concept of high horology was is based on the sponsorship of Richemont, the Richemont Group, and uh, what essentially they wanted to do is one of the sort of there had to be a good reason not to buy a quartz watch. Okay, so let's face it. Um, the quartz watches were then and still are more accurate in general than your typical, even your best watches, your best mechanical watches. And so they came up with that, and then they set up the foundation of the High Horology Foundation. And if you've ever read that, it's sort of there's a Spanish term is cuando le conviene, it's whatever convenient, and they they sort of brought out the idea, which I think on the one hand is really a very useful one. On the other hand, it's all hyperbole and marketing. One of the things that they had originally was for watches to be considered high horology, they had to be precious metal. Well, with at the time, I think gold was selling for around 100, $200 an ounce, and now it's over $4,000. So I mean, they just sort of rolled out of. It doesn't make the same kind of sense it did when they first came up with this idea. The other part of it was for it to be in house, so they had to be in house. But at least as far as I can see, there's some other movement makers uh, like Mojon, that's with Crenode, with Agenor, and some other companies that make movements that the watches that get them are immediately considered high horology, and they've won a whole bunch of Grand Prix awards, which is also, I think, probably part of the same crowd, so to speak. And so I think there's the things that I think are the most important in we'll call a high horology is the quality of the movement. And that I think is where you get your real difference in. Um they if you have an inexpensive movement that you put into, a gold watch or blinged up watch, it I would agree that's not high horology. On the other hand, you can have a not so hot case for a watch containing some incredible horology. So I think that's one of the things that we need to consider. So that these are my thoughts. Okay, so when we want to talk about it, so let me see what who else is irresponsible enough to join me today. Hey, Tony. Hey, Washington. Damon, Mark, Fernie, how you doing? Michael. Um, so anyway, this is for the, the whole thing. What was it called? Busy somebody who was the name of his who wanted to find out about entering high horology, and I wanted to have a good reason. Hey, John, how you doing? Without either going on sort of buying into the whole hyperbole part of it, but really saying, okay, let's find out what really makes. I would say instead of high horology, is more about standing horology. Who makes watches with really good horology? Let me give you an example of a company that always was considered high horology, but only later on, I think, truly became it, and that's Vacheron Constantin. They had made their own movements, but some were, some weren't. The first overseas I had a movement by Girard-Perregaux. Now, the rest of the watch was a wonderful watch. Now, in 2016, well, actually, I guess it was 2013, they came out with I think it was a 4400 that was purely by them. But even more significantly, I think, in 2016, they came out with the 5100 movement, which was automatic, and it was just a fantastic movement. So I think that sort of they're in and out of it in some ways. Another criteria, of course, was the Geneva seal, and that was sort of like an automatic. He got it, and so. But the problem with Geneva seal, it was only for watches in the canton of Geneva, and so companies like Audemars Piguet, which have just made nothing but, in my opinion, really excellent watches, could never get one. Not because they didn't deserve one in terms, or they wouldn't meet the criteria, but rather they were over in the Jura Mountains somewhere, or outside of the uh, Geneva Canton. So the same thing with companies like H. Moser, a whole bunch of other ones who simply are over in La Chaux de France, or one of the other centers where they have watchmaking in Switzerland. So that's what I wanted to kick it off with. So, what would your advice be, the rest of you guys, uh, for high horology, if you're going to talk about high horology? Dominic, let's see, some of the oldest makers even, yeah, I agree, Dominic. Yeah, yeah, some of them even made their own cases. They made everything. I think, though, that, there's one way to look at it. If you have a company that concentrates or focuses on making cases, you're probably going to have pretty good cases. This is why I was so I'm I came down on the side of the jewelers, companies like Chaumet and Boucheron and Chanel. Now these who had their concentration was in making jewelry, which and part of the things they made, they had no problem making cases and bracelets and dials and hands and all of those things. But they really weren't into horology in the same way. But then companies like Chanel bought a hunk of FP Journe, they bought a hunk of Romain Gautier. Then they set up their own movement making company for high horology, and they produced high horology with their initial one with some help from Romain Gautier. I mean, and so, you know, what are you going to do? I think the same thing is true with Louis Vuitton and his Louis H. What is it? LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Maurice Hennessy. So, so let's hear what you have to say about if you're giving advice to someone. Before I do that, just let me suggest also, besides Switzerland, Germany has all Lange, Langenson, um, Moritz Grossman, all of those I think produce high horology watches, along with some of the smaller ones like Kadoki, and his. So there's a lot of in Japan. oh, Jaime Ahsoka and his tsunami. I'd love to have one of those. And there are probably some others in other places that I missed, but I think while it's focused on Swiss watches, I think it's broader than that. All right, now I'll shut up a second and see what you guys have to say. Yeah, some of the older makers. Dominic's point's a good one. But I'll tell you though, they had, for the most part, the whole system of making watches in Switzerland has relied on these small companies that make all the different parts and everything, and then so this was with gear. Some will make gear, some will do this, some will do that, and the Larique experience, such as it's been, some of this we there are companies that specialize in making dials like Metallim, and ones that make cases like, there are a lot of them that make cases. Some seem to have changed somewhat more recently, but there's a company called AB Concepts and Products that we're using now. They make very nice cases. So, but they don't make a lot of other things. There's this one company that's really interesting called UMan that I'm hoping that we can do something with, because they make cases, dials, and hands, and that's just like all in the same shop. Okay, enough of me. I picture the old school watchmakers handcrafting each watch. I heard in the old days there was one watchmaker in each window crafting the watches. Anything close to that today? Well, it's I Brian, I don't think it's a matter of making so much the whole watch in one place as it is the development of everything in perhaps one place, and then using all of the other resources in Switzerland for the rest of the watch. Very crisis crossing definition. Vintage Piaget brought their movements, if not mistaken. Did they yet did their case and bracelet? I'm not sure. That's a good question. Piaget is one of those. I think they are making their own movements now. They were still are, I think, very famous for making these very thin movements, and then they have that sports watch that I don't know what, I think they make the movements for their polo. Dominic. Now, most major brands that want to be called high horology make most parts in the movement and the watch, and if they don't like it, they keep it under wraps. I don't know. Now, here's one of the things. In fact, Dominic, in that book you sent me, it was a really that was fantastic book. Dominic sent me a book. God, it's been what 9, 10 months ago, and it was about an American company called Waltham. It's right up the road in Waltham, Massachusetts, and what they did, they brought in a lot of the at the time, this is like 1879, they brought in some of the mass production uh, elements to it, but they also were aiming at a very high quality. And when the Swiss visited the US at one of the big exhibitions they have, they were freaked out by what Waltham was doing. And so they actually sent a spy into Waltham to see what they did. Now, what Waltham ended up doing was shooting itself in the foot. They hired a guy, a production guy, and his idea was to see how cheap you could make them. And so he wanted to increase the production and keep lowering the price. And along with that, he started lowered the quality. What the Swiss did, they took a lot of the American uh, production with them back to Switzerland, but they integrated it with the way the Swiss had been doing things with all of these little shops doing specializing in these different parts of a watch. Now, if a single company does all of the parts, that doesn't mean that they can do it anywhere near as well as one of these little uh, some guy, some little craftsman in the wintertime, instead of farming, is doing all of the work to make a certain part. Some of them will just specialize in making a single gear. And so they get pretty good at it, as opposed to a company trying to do everything. Not too long ago, I read a story about, I think it was Tag Heuer. And Tag Heuer was very excited about this new system they had. And the whole thing is, I think, to a great extent, was based on sort of computer controlled production of it. Okay, you don't not going to see the craftsmanship. I think it becomes a very difficult thing. On the one hand, when you got a company like Rolex, they're putting out what, about 1.5 million watches a year. You don't have a bunch of little Swiss watchmakers, working away at Rolex. You have an excellent production system that's very efficient. What happens with Patek Philippe, they're putting out about 50 something thousand a year. You got a whole lot of watches there. And again, you don't have your little craftsman there sitting at a bench doing that. You got something else. And there's one of the reasons they went to the silicon hairsprings is that they don't have all of the problems that were inherent, I think, in the hairsprings made of transitional metals. Now, a lot of that has changed, and oddly enough, has been changed by one of the companies, namely Rolex, that came out with the Parachrome hairspring. And then you have the Straumann hairspring, and then in Germany you have the one by Carl Haas, and they've addressed those problems. So, there's certain, I guess there's certain, to get something that there's a stamp on it that says high horology, what is it going to look like? I think if there's certain brands that you can almost guarantee that you're getting high horology. I think with ones like Audemars Piguet, and then you have your top level independents like FP Journe. So you have a lot like that, but then you have other ones that I think that are important, especially for somebody getting into it, that are more affordable, like Chopard LUC. I think that is one that I think would be that has it. Vacheron Constantin sort of got this entry level that's much less expensive than the other ones, but just one notch above it, or just in fact one modification of the model. It goes from sort of a nice watch into Geneva seal level watches. So all of these kinds of things that, and I think that advice to beginners in getting into high horology: find out everything in the world you can. I mean, really study it, and then find something you like. That's the other thing. People have watches that they may never wear. When I got my first Patek Philippe Calatrava, I was told that it was too delicate, to wear all the time. So I rarely wore the thing. I loved the watch, but didn't wear it. So I think that's, so yeah, okay. So someone could say stamped, it has a Geneva seal, high horology, and made out of gold, a wonderful hand wound movement, but it was a little too small and some other things like that. Okay, let's see what you guys have to say. Okay, JJ it was 71 2003. An expensive watch weighed with minimum precious minerals is high horology. It can be, yeah, I agree. I mean, the horology is the movement. The rest is sort of the wrappings, all right? That's only partially true, but part of it. Sounds like Rolex's vertical integration strategy. I know Oris isn't necessarily high horology, but uh, they're close to the old school way because of their independence, and they're not beholden to a big conglomerate. That's an interesting idea on it. Michael, what are your thoughts on Dornbluth? Oh, Michael, I was hoping nobody would ask about that. All right. What happened with Dornbluth und Sunda is is really interesting. When I first a long time ago, I even did a video on them, and at the time they were just sort of moving from a 6498, I think, into one that was sort of theirs, and they came into it out of the the reconsolidation of Germany. Before that, it was it was the kinds of watches that were being made in what was called East Germany at the time. They weren't really very much, but I think Dornbluth and Son, they have one that they made with the Maltese cross and some of those. So I would consider those to be outstanding horology. But see, this is why the whole thing that started with high horology had more to do with having a good reason to spend a lot of money on a watch that wasn't as accurate as a quartz watch. Oh, right, those were the origins of it. So yeah, no, I agree with you on that the particular one with the stop work and the Maltese cross. I mean, because see, to me, what they're doing there is that they're addressing the whole issue of constant force. And so many, I mean, some of the ones that address constant force simply do it with really excellent work. Uh, this is one thing, and I've got to tell you, people I have a great deal of respect for, and they're really smart watchmakers, disagree with this. Okay, so let me preface it with that. One of the reasons I like the lower frequencies, like 18,000 semi oscillation per hour, or actually anything under 4 hertz, is because in order to do that, you do have one thing that adds to constant force, and that's the greater inertia of a larger balance wheel. But also, too, the higher the hertz, you get a lot of accuracy out of that. I think that's one reason that 4 hertz and then Defy Labs at Zenith is trying to go up to, it's doing stuff on 5 hertz. But that doesn't even begin to even touch what a quartz watch will do. It's something like 32,000 hertz or something crazy like that. So on the other hand, in order to have a watch working well at one of the lower hertz, everything else about all of the craftsmanship around it has to be better. Like I said, people who really know this stuff disagree with me. Okay, so having said that, that's my own view of things. But then I see all of these top watchmakers are doing exactly that. They have these lower hertz. Take a look at the finalist and the GPHG. Most of them are under 3 hertz, or 3 hertz or under. So but but like I said, that's the reason may be more to show off that hey, you're really a good, you're really good at watchmaking. I don't know. You're right, Dominic. Yeah. They have they nixed that's why, Patek Philippe lost all of its, Geneva seal, and so they have to use a PP seal, which which to me is like, yes, we have the good housekeeping seal of approval. It's our seal. So it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, if you want to say, okay, uh, we don't need no stinking badge. Uh, they did it because the Geneva seal wanted to preserve certain things, exactly what you're saying, Dominic. So that's, you know, you can go with that. And even though Geneva seal is only for the Geneva Canton, I think that the quality Fleurier, the QF seal, the quality Fleurier, which is over in Fleurier, that's not the name of the canton, but it's sort of an area where you have Parmigiani, and you actually have uh, Chopard as well. Okay, let's see. Ben, I hope JLC is not considered entry level. No, it's not. Here's the thing about Jaeger-LeCoultre is that, see, it was making movements for all of the companies that are considered high horology. The Geneva, the Holy Trinity, Audemars Piguet, Vacheron Constantin, and Patek Philippe were all using movements by Jaeger-LeCoultre. So, I mean, so then they decided, well, they're going to make their own, they're going to have their own company, and then they were bought by Richemont. So, that's had some other consequences too. But fortunately, right now at least, uh, I don't see Richemont going for the silicon stuff like Swatch did. Yeah, yeah, Ben, I agree. Jaeger-LeCoultre is a good one. 9/11. Okay. Hi, Oscar. Um, well, that's what it is, Michael. Okay, yeah, Pelagos. Yeah, Pelagos is a nice watch. That's a Tudor that I like. Um, yeah, I the one I have on this is a special one, and I'll tell you why. This is a watch by Daniel Roth. Okay, it's called the Daniel Roth Metropolitan. Now, here's why it's important. Okay, um, first of all, why in the world he's got 24 cities, all right, under the watch. It's not a world timer. What you have two windows, one at 6 and one at 12 o'clock. And the one that is opposite, the two opposites are simply exactly 12 hours apart. So like right now it's 4:30 here in the New York time zone, but in Bangkok it's 4:30 in the morning. All right, which is sort of fun but nuts. But the real value of this watch, if I can show it to you, tonight in the U.S., tomorrow, but I think most people we go from daylight savings time to standard time. Okay, Europe's already done it, but the United States is doing it tonight. This watch, let's see if I can bring it up here for you. This one of the reasons I'm wearing it today. On the side, it has a couple little. Let me see if you can see it. They're pretty small. Anyway, there's a pin pusher up here and a pin pusher down here, okay? Now, what I do when I wanna change the time, if it's turning to standard time, they have a little double W up here, which means for winters when you go to that. I push it and it falls back an hour. So all I've got to do to change the time on this one is in the fall to push the one up here and it'll fall back an hour. And then when daylight saving times comes again, then I push a button down here. That's what I like about, among many things I like about Daniel Roth. Now, his company is this High Horology. I don't know, and I don't care. It's it's really great horology, and that's all I care about. This is another thing that really just I don't know. Again, it's me, it's not the world. Um, but it is, as Dominic pointed out, the Geneva Seal is that I don't know if a watch doesn't have the possibility of having a regulator, it doesn't seem like the kind of watches I care about collecting. This one is automatic, which I'm not crazy about automatics, and it's got more things I don't like. It's got a solid back. I like the ones I can see. It's automatic. I like hand wound, but I really like the watch overall. So I can't complain. And the little pusher down here is that I can push it to match whatever city that I'm in. So if I wanted to, for example, if I wanted to put in Paris, Paris and Geneva are they're in the same one, but they decided Paris was better known. They got okay. So is this high horology? It's good horology, because it's done by a guy who I know I know he's one of the top watchmakers in the world. Same thing with Michel Parmigiani, with F.P. Journe, with Carrie Booten Lannon. Got to admit it, and some of these other ones who are really great movement makers. Any watch that has an Agenor movement in it is going to be high horology, and if not high, exceptional. Okay, so I think that this is why I say if you're starting into high horology, there are a lot of different options. Most of them are not exactly the most affordable ones. Okay. Let's see what else you guys have to say. Yeah. Okay, Ben, I'm glad you like them. Titanium. Now, see, I'm not a fan of titanium, not because I have anything against it. It's tough, really great metal to use, but it's light, and I like more heft and steel and gold and platinum. But right now, the only heft I can afford is steel. But I have nothing against titanium. It's just sort of a style, and I think that becomes important. Some watches that I really like are titanium, but they're just they don't belong with the kind of watch I want, not because I have anything against it. That's another thing too that's really important because one person or one group of people, decide that this is the kind of watches to get. Don't believe it unless you like it. That's another point. Okay, let's see. Okay, Ben 10, you want a PF Honda. I think you're talking about a Parmigiani Fleurier Honda. So, but a Honda would be fine too. And getting a Chopard. Yeah, Chopard is a good one. Let me change that. Chopard LUC. There are other ones too that have great everything about them, and other ones that are junk, like Cartier. Cartier, especially Must de Cartier, are the Must de Cartier were just junk. But there are other ones that are all over the place. Some of them have ETAs, some of them have quartz, some of them have movements that were developed by Carol Fostier Casapi. So you got to, that becomes a little more problematic. They have one of the best looking cases and bracelets in the Santos of any watch that I know of. I mean, it's just gorgeous. But that's not horology, that's design. They got great design. Hey, Oscar. Okay, Oscar says, if you're talking about a diver, you're talking about a clunky watch. I wouldn't just a real diver. I don't know who takes their who in the world goes out and they buy a Submariner with the idea that I'm going down to Davy Jones' locker. I just can't see it. If you go to a dive shop, you're not going to find any of the ones we collect, I don't think. Hey, Von Kruel, how you doing? You want a regulator? Same here. Automatics will go dead on you at random times. I officially like manual watches better. Yeah, same here. Do you recommend the Pelagos? I don't have one. I just like them. They have the Pelagos has, I think, one of the early when Tudor started manufacturing their own movements. That's another thing too. You've got you take, for example, watches by Tudor, even watches by Chanel. If you look at the more entry-level Chanel, you get to a point and suddenly there's this really cool-looking movement, and that's the one by Fenici. But Chanel also owns part of Romain Gauthier, and one of the reasons they bought it, Romain Gauthier is one of the few independent watchmakers who also makes his own parts. And so that was, I think, one of the reasons they bought them. God knows what else they're buying. They sort of borrow some of that talent. And so if you take a look at the J12 by Chanel with one of the Canisi movements, that is actually a Tudor movement, but made to look cool, then you have, you end up with a far more interesting watch. High horology on a budget. That'd be a good topic. Michael, I tell you, that is, I think, almost rather than high horology on a budget, I think the thing to find is really excellent or exceptional horology on a budget, which I think you can get better than, there's sort of like, you have certain movements that are good movements, they're well done, without, I guess, much soul to them. They crank them out fast enough. And then there's the ones by independent watchmakers, and then there's somewhere in between. I don't know. This is where it becomes difficult. I think your really good horology, to get really good horology, you can find some on a budget. There are, believe it or not, there's some Chaumes out there that they put in like a JLC movement or some other great movement in it. There's even one by Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren has this, I think it's called a Sportage, and it has a Jaeger-LeCoultre movement in it. So, there's to me, the most fun part of horology is a watch collection is finding that horology, start with the movement and find it in places you wouldn't expect to find it. there's this one, and some of these are really hard to find, by Hermes. There's a Hermes dressage that's called a mystique or magical something, and it's got a washer movement in it, but it's a special washer movement that does very cool things. I mean, something like oh, what's his name? Uh, the guy who does the upside down letters. You know, when you look at the watch, he's the only one that's right side up is the correct time. Who is that? Bitard, I forgot his name. Fabulous watchmaker. By the way, too, I think there are a couple places, and this is for new people to high horology. Actually, it's for anybody and who's interested in high horology. Take a look. Go to the Grand Prix. Look at the Grand Prix winners and the ones who have made nominations. Or sometimes those who have entered it don't get any respect. A lot of the early ones by H. Moser didn't, but now they are. Same thing with Parmigiani. Once they started doing that, but before that, there were some great deals. Okay, so you find out, oh, hey, they won an award. Let's see what they did right before. That's where you might find some great deals too. But that is a good place to look. I mean, ones gee, I never heard of those guys. One I just discovered this year, who is my new favorite watchmaker, is a guy named Luca Soprano, and that was because he did the Derek Platt Remontoir. Oh yeah, 911. If I had a Submariner, I would not take it, especially in saltwater. I wouldn't take it in a wading pool. I just, if you want to watch, get a G-Shock to do that kind of stuff with. I just don't. I think the term that I read somewhere are death divers, and there's nothing wrong with death divers. There's one of the really good things about divers and all of the work they do to seal them up to keep them waterproof. They also make them very dustproof, and so that's a good thing. There are other ones I just don't understand. I don't understand the Yachtmaster by Rolex. The Yachtmaster 2, I understood and really appreciate. They put in this incredibly cool movement that does a regatta countdown on it. The other one just looks like, you know, if somebody showed them to me as which one's this Submariner and which one's the Yachtmaster, I couldn't tell them apart. So, I mean, there are all kinds of little things like that. Figure out. Okay, you don't like the snowflake hand. Yeah. Now, there's something else too that I think it's important to understand is that you have companies, and this one seems to be going through some kind of change, like the Sandoz Family Foundation. Now, they own Parmigiani, they own the movement maker, they own the case maker, they own the what are it? The little parts maker, they own the hairspring maker, they own they have the whole entire vertical integration on that. There's and then they farm it out to different companies. I was looking at the number of hairsprings that Alto Calpa makes. That's their hairspring one. There's something like 20,000 they kicked out. Now, if you look at the production of Parmigiani watches, you don't have anything near that. So, the same thing with the H. Moser. You got 50,000 Strawman hairsprings going out the door, and you got 5,000 H. Moser watches that have been produced. So you have a lot of things like that. I think that Michael A, his point, we ought to talk about high horology on a budget if we could get it. I just realized I went way over my time limit, maybe because I didn't shut up enough. Let me take a look at this, but I've got to run now. Let's see. Okay. Tony, high horology on a budget. That's like Carl F. Butcher. Some of them may be, but I don't know. You see, Carl F. Butcher, like Chrono Swiss, and some of these other ones. There's I don't quite where to put them really. Satori Ballard. I don't have a handle on that. Ludovic Bayard, Sonny, that is the name I was trying to think of. That guy's stuff is just fantastic. There's just brilliant watches that he has. The trouble is that they're way up there. It went from like a really super expensive watch before the pandemic was $20,000, and you could get an entry level FP Journe for that. Now the entry level on FP Journe is like 40,000 for a chronometre Souvein. If you can get one, instead of being on a waiting list for God knows how long. I like the Milgauss too, Von Krul. I also like there's a certain Air King that has exactly the same movement as a Milgauss. And those are the fun kinds of things to know. The Milgauss was, I guess, with the silicon they have 15,000 Gauss. With the Milgauss they got 1,000. So too many good independents to care about Rolex right now. Okay, Tim Cheeseman. I think Milgauss will be back within a year or two. I don't think so, Tim, and I'll tell you why. The big selling point on the Milgauss was the Faraday cage that they had for it. And like I said, the difference between 1,000 Gauss, which is what the Milgauss is, and 15,000 with their silicon hairsprings. I mean, why would they bring it back? I think they got rid of it because they were looking out ahead, knowing what's coming. And I think that some of the other ones, like the Air King and the Perpetual, what's it called? The Oyster Perpetual, their entry level, they both have the same movement. In fact, in looking at the Rolex movements, they have a very limited number of actual movements. They have a lot of variations on the same base movement, though. Okay, guys. Okay, one last thing. Yachtmaster for sub fans with slimmer wallets. Okay, RK. Also, early use of silicon. Oh, really? It's too bad. Okay, guys. Well, listen. Thank you all for dropping by. Um, I'm way over, and I talked way too much today. So because I want to hear, I have more fun listening to you guys than listening to myself. Take care. Have a great day, and remember, everybody. Tomorrow, or actually midnight tonight, in the U.S., we set our clocks back 1 hour. Okay, I can do it with one poke here, though. Take care.